To start this procedure, put your key in the ignition, put the truck in neutral, and then turn the ignition back off. The first thing you want to do is remove the differential fill plug to make sure that comes out. Apparently, someone had trouble with this prior and it didn't come out, so they came up with this fancy design of a welded nut onto the fill plug, which I guess works for me. Turns out it's a 15 millimeter. Break it free. It should be a 3/8 drive. Okay, there we go. Pull that out. Make sure your vehicle is safely raised and supported. The front wheels will have to get chalked off because if you raise the rear end, there will be nothing holding your vehicle from rolling because obviously the front wheels spin freely. So take off this cover. And take off your lug nuts. What you want to do next is take this drum off. Mine is actually seized onto the hub. As you can see, I can spin it freely, so the brake shoes are not engaged. If your brake shoes are engaged, you're going to have to back off the shoes a little bit, which I can show you how to do later after I take this off. There's a little window in the back that you can go through. Mine are free, so I know it's seized onto the hub, so I'm going to spray it with some rust penetrant. And then you want to hammer it here in between the studs. Just make sure not to hammer the studs, and that should hopefully break it free. There we go, that popped off. It should be pretty free now. There you go. What I want to do next is just use some parts cleaner, clean off the brake dust that's here so I don't breathe it in as I'm disassembling it. In order to remove the axle, I'm going to have access to the inside of the differential. So remove all of these 13 millimeter bolts that hold this cover on. I'm going to start at the bottom and end at the top. That way I can pry away the bottom, leave the top attached so the fluid doesn't come splashing out. I'm going to be careful as I remove this last bolt so the cover doesn't come falling down. It shouldn't, but you never know. Okay, I'm going to start this bolt back in. This is going to secure the cover in place. And then with a little pry bar or screwdriver, whatever you have, go ahead and start prying it off. Oh, fluid's going to come out. And remove your cover. Now, because the truck is in neutral, you can spin the drive shaft, and you want to spin it until the differential shows this bolt right here. Once this is accessible, you can stop. I'm going to use a 7 millimeter socket, break this free. There we go. And the next thing you want to do is reach around the top, push this pin through, and on this side I'm going to grab it with a rag. At this point you don't want to spin the differential anymore because these inner gears, the top and the bottom ones, are not held in place and they can pop out. So the next thing you want to do is go out to the axle and push it in. If it doesn't push in far enough, you can use a rubber mallet and just hit the hub in the middle. Once you've done that, I can't show you because I can't spin the differential. If you spin the differential right now, these bottom and top gears are not held in, so they're going to want to pop out. But get a very small magnet, and there's a clip in there that you're going to want to remove. There's the clip that I was talking about. You can see right there's a cutout in the axle shaft. That's exactly where that clip sits. Here's an example of it on the other side. It's right there. Next, pull the axle right out. Right here is where that C-clip sits. To get this bearing and the seal out, I'm going to take them both off at the same time. I'm going to use a tool that looks just like this one. This is a bearing and seal puller. You put it in like this, and then once it's in there, that little plate hooks onto the bearing. Tighten this nut up to lock it in. Then you want to get your slide hammer, thread your slide hammer into this tool. Make sure this is nice and tight. This will prevent things from going flying away. You want to clean up this area where the cover mounts. You want a nice flat surface so we can install our new gasket. And this had a cork gasket before, so take all this off. And then I'm going to use this screwdriver to get off the majority of it. And then I'm going to use a razor blade for the more fine stuff. I also made sure I covered the differential so that no debris makes its way into the gears. Okay, make sure nothing got into the differential. Now you want to do the same thing to the differential cover. With the axle tube nice and clean, free of oil or any other debris, I can get ready to put my bearing in. You want to install this bearing with the text, the stamped text, towards the inside. And I'm going to use a bearing and seal installer. You want a plate that fits exactly on the outer diameter of this bearing. You don't want to press on the actual bearings, you want to press on the outer race. So start your bearing in here and then put your tool over and give it a few good whacks with the hammer. That should start driving it in. Make sure it goes in straight, not at an angle. Okay, at this point you can see it's bottomed out. You can tell that the bearing's bottomed out first of all by the sound. The sound will change from a hollow sound to a more solid, full sound when you hammer. And there's also a lip right in here. Once you see that on the outer part of the bearing, you know that it's completely bottomed out where it's supposed to be seated. With the same type of tool but a different larger plate, you want to take your seal and start that on. Again, hammer only on the outside of the seal. You can gently go around it like that to make sure that it's seated. And the next thing I'd like to do before the axle goes in is I'm going to pre-lubricate this bearing in here. This truck is supposed to take 75-90 gear oil. So I'm just going to spin this bearing and coat it with fluid. Next, you want to install your axle shaft. Make sure it's nice and clean. There's no debris on it. Be very careful and gentle with the seal. Don't let it ride on the seal. Just hold up the weight of it. And once you get all the way in where the differential is, you're going to want to make sure you find the hole that it's supposed to go into. Just be very gentle. See, right now it's stopped, but it's not in all the way. You're going to have to twist it up and down a little bit. There you go. Spin it, twist it, lift it a little bit until it pops into place. Here's a look at the inside of the differential when the axle goes in. has to slide in all the way so that you can see that slot where the C-clip has to go in. If you cannot see the whole slot, that means that center block right there has moved and you need to adjust it left, right, up, down, whatever it takes so the axle can go into the hole that is made inside of this block. After that, get your magnet with a little C-clip and install it on the axle. Just like that. Make sure it's seated all the way. And now you want to grab the axle and pull it back out. As you can see, that got sucked into the differential, and that's exactly what you want. The next step is going to be to take this center locking pin and slide it into the differential here. If it doesn't fit, that means one or more of the gears have moved. So you can usually reach behind it, push it, move it a little bit. Everything is very tightly machined in here, so if something does not line up perfectly, it's not going to go in. You can try to spin the axle a little bit. Sometimes that'll make things loosen up. There we go. Whoa. Make sure that the hole in this pin lines up with the hole where the bolt has to go through. And make it flush. Now that this pin is in, you can spin the differential if you need to. I have cleaned the bolt down with a little bit of brake parts cleaner so it's degreased, and then I put some red thread locker on it. That's going to ensure that this bolt does not back out. So go ahead and start it in. And with the same wrench that you used to take it out, go ahead and make it nice and tight. The next thing I want to do is degrease this surface where the cover is going to mount. That way the gasket maker can stick, and make sure there's no debris anywhere in here. My next step is going to be applying some gasket maker onto this cover. Thin bead all the way around. Make sure you go on the inside of the bolt holes. If you think it's not even enough, you can use your finger and just very gently even it out. Usually I don't like to do this, but this time I wasn't very precise with the application. And I've also cleaned the threads on all of the cover bolts, and I've applied some blue thread locker to them. So remember, the cover goes with the magnet facing down, not up. Line up your bolt holes, and then I'm going to start in all my bolts. I'm not going to tighten them yet. I just want to start them so that they hold the cover in place. With this held in place, I can put back anything that was attached to the cover, such as the brake line and parking brake line brackets. Now I'm going to snug this up, and then I'll torque it afterwards. I'm going to go in a cross pattern, that way the gasket can seat itself properly. And don't worry, I didn't actually make it tight. I'm going to torque it in a couple minutes. I'm going to let the RTV sit. Go ahead and torque all these to 30 foot-pounds. Okay, it's all torqued. Back here at the wheel, if your hub is not clean like this one, go ahead and clean it with a wire brush, spray it down. I'm going to apply some anti-seize. That's going to prevent the drum from sticking in the future. Start on all of your lug nuts, and then we'll bottom them out and torque them to 140 foot-pounds. Don't forget about your lug nut cover. All right, let's raise it up and put some fluid in it. At this point, you can fill up the differential with 75-90 gear oil. Make sure that it's a limited slip fluid. If not, you're supposed to add the limited slip additive. if you have the limited slip differential, which this is. If it's not, then don't worry about it. And I'm going to add fluid until it comes out of this fill plug. As you can see, it's starting to drip here. So I know that this is now full. I'm going to stop and cap it off. Okay, go ahead and cap it off. Make it nice and snug. Again, this is supposed to be a 3/8 drive. Mine is not, and it does not go all the way in. Once it gets snug, leave it at that. Okay, everything's back together. Go ahead and pump up your brakes, take it for a road test, and make sure you don't hear any weird noises.